Hi everybody. As usual, the books I'm going to be talking about will be timestamped in the description below. Mad Ship by Robin Hobb is book 2 in the Live Ship Traders trilogy, which is the second series in the larger realm of the Elderlings. This series is largely nautical with sentient ships, with pirates. Trade is an important aspect to the story, especially as characters create oaths with other characters or groups of people create oaths or agreements with other groups. But as a contrast to that, we also have slavery in the world, which is obviously robbing one of one's agency and forcing one to do tasks that they otherwise might not do. But as a contrast to both slavery and to trade, we also have self-sacrifice explored in this series. So self-sacrifice obviously requires agency, but it's agency to do something without a sense of transaction. And so I love how that's explored in this series so far. I will also add that family dynamics are richly explored as we have multiple perspectives, and so we have multiple families. And in this installment, I felt like Hobb really explores how an individual's perception of duty, of loyalty, of privilege and discipline, how these things can be informed by one's family, for good or for ill. Independence, one's sense of independence. That was something that was a huge highlight for me in this series, was seeing how that played out. Another huge highlight was a certain character. I won't give away the name in fear of spoilers, but there was one character that had a profound transformation, and I appreciated that this transformation was gradual. It was through little insights along the way that are just seamlessly connected into the character's inner thoughts, the way that she would speak and hear herself and recognize where her thoughts came from. And again, I think that goes back to family dynamics as well, and recognizing her true desires, recognizing different ways or different options that she has in the world. Another huge highlight was the way that characters that you wouldn't expect forge connections. They would intersect and then forge connections, or they would intersect with some sense of discord between each other. And while I had an overall positive experience, I do have some negatives. One of the negatives is that I was not expecting this book to have at least 3 different love triangles. And I am a love triangle defender. I made a whole video about why you might not hate love triangles in fantasy. Yes, every trope or device can be executed poorly or executed well. And in this case, I felt there was a range of that for me when it came to these love triangles. There was one love triangle that was a bit of a stretch to call it a love triangle, but it was a bit weird. I'll leave it at that. There was another love triangle that was very YA, I would say. And yet, I actually thought that was my favorite love triangle because it involved a character that I enjoyed quite a bit. And then the third love triangle, I just did not care for whatsoever. I was bored to tears with it. I mean, not to tears literally, but I found myself dragging through the book during those sections. I did not want to pick up the book whenever I was reading about these 2, 3 particular characters. And fortunately, it seemed to settle by the end, but I just didn't feel the need for it. So I would say because of that, and also Sea Serpent chapters, I mentioned this in my Ship of Magic review, that I just did not care for the perspective of certain sea serpents. That continued to be a miss for me in this installment. So I would say that this was a little bit of a step down for me from book 1. I would say it's a step down. It's a step down for me from book 1. At the same time, there were so many things I loved in this book, and I'm still in awe of the way that Hobb writes, the clarity of her writing, the way she unfolds description, the flow to her prose, and the way that she integrates character psychology with setting. I think it's phenomenal. Her dialogue is incredible as well. I don't think all authors are as good at dialogue as Hobb is, and she's quite gifted at it. So I think this was still a strong installment for me. I'm still going to continue on to Ship of Destiny. I'm excited to do so, even though I was definitely more positive about Ship of Magic. Blindsight by Peter Watts is a hard science fiction book that explores the intersection between intelligence and sentience, how these two things are not necessarily the same. It presents a flipped paradigm to look at consciousness in a much more nihilistic way than how we understand it. This is told in first-person narration from a character named Siri, and when you are introduced to this character in the prologue, opening up with the Ted Bundy quote, you get the sense that this is a complete sociopath of a character. He is somebody who had a surgery in order to remove the part of his brain that includes epilepsy. As a result, he's a bit different. He ends up getting assigned to a spaceship that goes out on a journey to make contact with, I guess, another species that has made its presence known to mankind. So he goes on this spaceship with some other characters, including a vampire. Vampires are also part of the story. That was something I was drawn to about this story, by the way, was this idea or concept of sci-fi vampires. And so that is explained in a scientific way as well. But we do have this vampire character who is hooked up to the ship, who is relaying information from the ship to the other crewmen. And so Siri and this vampire and these other characters are trying to make sense of this alien vessel that they make contact with. And so it is a strange type of first contact story. The Chinese room experiment is brought up quite a bit in this book. I had to change positions due to the wind. So the Chinese room experiment is brought up in this book, and if you're not aware of the Chinese room experiment, this is usually showed as a baseline for distinguishing between computational intelligence versus true understanding. And there are several YouTube videos you could Google to find this illustrated, but it is important for understanding this story and what it's doing thematically. I would also say that this story is challenging. It's challenging because as it's told from Siri's perspective, we're getting the story in fragments. He's giving you some flashbacks to his life. He's giving you some information about what's going on the spaceship. It was also a bit challenging for me as a reader. I would say this is advanced hard sci-fi because of the jargon that Watts uses in his descriptions. He uses a lot of biological terms, a lot of terms related to physics. So there were several terms that I'm sure if I were somebody who had studied those fields in depth or was good at science, I probably would have not had as much trouble, but I had to look up several words in this book because I am not the most scientifically minded when it comes to physics and biology, but I did appreciate the way he wrote. I thought it worked for what he was doing. It was consistent, and the story did lead to an interesting exploration. It's not necessarily an exploration I 100% believe in or am sure about, but I appreciated the way it was handled in a fictional story. And I would say that this is also going to be a challenge for a lot of readers because our character that we're following, Siri, who's telling this in first person narration, he is he is quite a bit emotionally detached because of his condition. So it's for a purpose, but it can be hard to invest in a character or to feel connected to a character who is like that. I will be hosting a live show for this book. I don't know if that'll come out before or after this video, but this is for the Fireside Discord quarterly buddy read. And so this is something we just started. Blindsight was my choice and it won, but sadly, a lot of people on the fireside did not care for this book. I think I was the most positive about it. And I'm not saying it was a favorite of all time or anything. I just appreciated what Watts did. And so I'll be having a discussion with Matt on Books and Josh from Red Fury Books, the other owners of the fireside, plus Evie, our mod. I think they all did not like this book, but I'm looking forward to hearing their criticisms. So stay tuned for that. Purple and Black by KJ Parker is an epistolary novella with letters between a governor and his emperor. There is rebellion going on in the empire, and the governor is out in the field trying to quell the fires of rebellion, while the emperor is at court trying to keep order in his own palace. The letters, the way that the letters are addressed, is in the most ostentatious manner possible. So you get the letter addressed to the emperor as His Divine Majesty Nicephorus V, brother of the Invincible Sun, father of his people, defender of the faith, emperor of Visani. And then you go into the meat of the letter, and the governor says something along the lines of, "You bastard, you owe me." So you get the sense that rather than having this power imbalance between governor and emperor, these two guys are old college buddies. And you sense the friendship, the wit, the banter, the tone of that within the first few letters. And then as you go on, you start to get more in-depth connection and you start to sense who they are as individuals in a deeper way and their friendship, the history of their friendship. And then the story goes in a direction that I won't spoil, but thematically, the story also explores loyalty, friendship. I don't want to say too many of the themes because I'm afraid it will spoil this little novella, but I loved the way that it explored those themes with such excellent character development. I picked this up thanks to Alan from the Library of Alexandria, and Alan is constantly talking about how KJ Parker, he not only tells you that his characters are smart, He shows you how intelligent and clever they are. And this book is no exception. I thought it was a well-written story overall. I was impressed with the prose. I thought that there was depth to the writing, there was great flow to the writing, excellent character voice, and yet this is not high fantasy. It's very low fantasy, in fact. It's more along the lines of a Guy Gavriel Kay novel where there's almost no magic at all. In fact, I don't think there is any magic in this story, but it's still worth reading. It still has all the fantasy themes that you love. This is part of KJ Parker's Academic Exercises ebook, and I highly recommend checking it out if you get a chance. I really think that this is something that a wide range of readers would enjoy. The Claw of the Conciliator by Gene Wolfe is book 2 in Book of the New Sun. This is following Severian, a torturer. One of the biggest highlights of reading Book of the New Sun is trying to piece together what's going on because Severian is such an unreliable narrator and it's taking place in the future, but it's extremely reminiscent of a medieval past. You have references to animals that are extinct in our world, there's space travel, there are robots, there are so many mysterious psychedelic things. There's a little green man from the future. There are man apes. It got so strange and psychedelic towards the end, too, playing with time and space. Wolfe manages to capture rich, dark atmosphere, but still have a strange, off kilter, eccentric sense of tone at times as well. The characters in this story, it feels like they are almost improvising conversation along the way, and it makes the story odd. I'm reading this as part of a huge read along group that was organized by Talking Story, and we had a fabulous discussion of the first book of Shadow of the Torturer. And we're getting together for the second one over on Tudor Rambles channel. So I look forward to talking with everybody about this book. And I read this daily with Jake from Nerd Level Rising. I asked him if he'd be willing to read this with me a chapter a day and talk about it back and forth. And we had a wonderful time doing that. I feel like I got so much more out of the story, really taking my time and hearing Jake's thoughts bouncing back and forth between the two of us, catching different things, and that made the journey of exploring this strange abstract world all the more enjoyable. There is a lot of Catholic symbolism in the story, by the way. I did grow up Catholic, but I can't guarantee I caught all the references. I am looking forward, however, to the larger group discussion. Had a wonderful time with Jake, and yeah, I guess that's all I have to say for now. I'll be picking up book 3, hopefully in the fall, maybe in September. Since We Fell is a crime fiction novel by Dennis Lehane. This was my second chance with Dennis Lehane. I tried Mystic River, the audiobook, a few months ago. Maybe it was last year sometime, and I just couldn't quite connect to it. I decided to DNF it. I don't know if it was because I was trying to listen to it via audio. Maybe it was my mood at the time. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I wanted to give Dennis Lehane another chance. This book follows Rachel from Massachusetts. Her mother dies without ever revealing who her father was. And so she's on a mission at the beginning of the book to find out who her father is. She's a journalist. And then in the middle section of the book, we explore her journey to Haiti following the massive earthquake that took place there. I can't remember the year, in 2010. Yeah, the historic earthquake in Haiti that happened in 2010. And then the third part of the book explores Rachel's marriage and some other mysterious, strange things that ensue. I'm trying to keep this spoiler free and it's really challenging. But again, following 3 different things in this book. And the problem for me with this book is that none of those things really seem to come together. This book seemed to stretch for cohesion and did not quite come together. It's called Since We Fell, but really the book just fell apart. I think that Lehane is a talented writer in a sentence by sentence way. It's interesting because in the Fireside Discord, we have a question of the day, and I believe the question of the day right now is something along the lines of whether you think there's a difference between a good storyteller and a good writer and about your preference between the two. And I think that for this book in particular, Dennis Lehane is an excellent writer. I appreciated his descriptions of being in a bar and Tom Waits playing on the jukebox, and even some of the dialogue that occurred between characters. I thought he had a certain way of describing things that was clever. He had a great turn of phrase at times. And yet, I just didn't think that this story was very good. It just wasn't very interesting or cohesive. I kept going because I didn't want to give up a second time on Dennis Lehane. I wanted to see if my thoughts would change by the end of the book. So sadly, this just did not quite come together for me, even though I do think Dennis Lehane is a very talented writer. I might try a third book. I might try again with Dennis Lehane. I'm not sure, but this one I would not recommend. The Devil You Know by KJ Parker is book 2 in the Saloninus trilogy. I did not realize this was part of a trilogy before I read it. And fortunately, I have book 3 in the Academic Exercises ebook that I mentioned earlier. But this is following a brilliant, notorious philosopher, possibly the best in history. In this book, he is said to have written A Critique of Pure Reason, which we know was written by Immanuel Kant, as well as Principles of Mathematics by Bertrand Russell. And he also makes allusions to Nietzsche with the Übermensch. But yes, this is all attributed to this particular philosopher in the story. It is very much fantasy, by the way, whereas Purple and Black was more historical and barely fantasy, if fantasy at all. This one is certainly fantasy. We follow this philosopher. He is old. He decides that he wants to make a contract with the devil. So an agent from the devil comes to meet him and makes the agreement to restore this philosopher's body to his early 20s, restore him to perfect health, and he is allowed to live out the rest of his life until his natural death and get anything he wants in the process. This agent has to grant him any wish that he desires in exchange for eternal damnation in hell once he dies. This is about outsmarting the devil. And again, Parker shows off his skill at writing brilliant characters. I loved the direction this story went. I love the way that the agent of the devil has a weakness for aesthetics, for the writings of this philosopher, and for art, and for music. And the other character takes advantage of this, but there are so many other interesting twists and turns in the story. For a short novella, very entertaining. Highly recommend, though I haven't read book 1, so maybe it's better to read book 1 in this trilogy before reading book 2. I did listen to the audiobook of this, which I had through my Everend subscription, which is going to end in October. And so I wanted to take advantage of that. But unfortunately, I don't think there are audiobooks for the first and third book in this trilogy. I went through a massive reading slump in the month of June, and as a result, my friend David from Four Corners of the Page recommended to me a graphic novel called Nimona. So, Nimona is a charming fantasy graphic novel that follows a shape-changing little girl who she ends up coming to the doorstep of this villain character, a black-bearded villain character named Blackheart. And so Blackheart is the town's or city's villain, whereas there is a hero character named Goldenloin. And then you find out that Blackheart and Goldenloin have a history with one another. This fantasy graphic novel was charming. I loved the way it used fantasy tropes in a self-aware, meta-humorous way. And the artwork complemented that quite a bit as well. While this was pure fun entertainment, it also had an interesting way of exploring what it means to be a villain and the way that we try to fix or change people. Nimona has certain trust issues based on her past, which you learn about. Yet at the same time, it also explores having boundaries with people who are causing us harm. I also appreciated that the ending was satisfactory, but also a bit open. I love the balance between those two things, and I thought that this book it handled that well. I know that there's a Netflix adaptation. I haven't watched it. I don't think I will. I don't have a subscription to Netflix, but I loved the graphic novel. It was an excellent palate cleanser. It certainly helped. This book and Purple and Black saved me from my reading slump in the month of June. Please let me know in the comment section below if you've read any of the books I've mentioned, if you're planning to read any of them. Let me know how you're doing, and thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.